Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to get right into it. We're looking at a tragic event that unfolded in Sydney's Northwest. And our mission here is to just swiftly and very thoroughly extract the initial facts.
Exact.
The verified information that was released by authorities right after a violent incident involving teenagers this week.
That's right. And it's so important that you, the listener, get a clear picture of what was confirmed right away. The sources we have, they give us this very precise snapshot of the who, what, where, and when.
And this is information coming directly from police command.
Yes, specifically from Superintendent Naomi Moore, and also from local political figures. This isn't speculation.
Yeah.
This is the foundation of the case they're building.
And it's a profoundly sad foundation. We're focusing on the fatal stabbing of a 17-year-old boy. The immediate result was the arrest of a 15-year-old, and just the shock that went through the whole area. It's a tragedy that really demands we stick to the confirmed details.
Okay, let's unpack this. Maybe we should start with the timeline and the location. Yeah, good idea. So when we look at the timeline the police laid out, the incident happened pretty late in the afternoon on a Monday.
Right.
Superintendent Moore was specific. She said it was around 4:20 p.m.
4:20 p.m. I mean, that's a time when people are doing the school run, they're coming home from work, just getting on with their afternoon. It's certainly not the middle of the night.
Precisely. And that specific time, it immediately puts the event, right in the middle of everyday community life, which I think really contributes to that sense of public shock that comes through in all the statements.
Okay, so let's pinpoint the scene. We know it's in Sydney's northwest, the Rouse Hill area. Where exactly did authorities say this happened?
They confirmed the scene was a reserve, so a public park space, right at the very end of Caballo Street.
A public reserve?
Yeah, and that's key because it establishes this wasn't some hidden, isolated incident. It happened in a place literally designed for public use, for recreation.
And the police commentary really seems to hammer this local context, doesn't it? They make a point of noting that this reserve is just minutes away from Ironbark Ridge Public School.
And an early education provider, too.
Wow. That single detail is just, it's chilling.
It is, and I think you have to believe the authorities highlighted that proximity for a very specific reason.
To show this can happen anywhere.
To underscore that this kind of violence, it isn't just happening in some, faraway place. It's intersecting with core community hubs, the very places where families expect to be safe. That's the real takeaway for local residents. It happened right there.
It just magnifies the shock. Okay, so if we move from the scene to the event itself, the official police account gave a very specific breakdown of who was involved right before it escalated.
They did. The account says that the victim, the 17-year-old, he was initially with one other young boy, just the two of them.
Okay.
They were then approached by a different group, which was described as 2 to 3 other male young persons.
So it's a confrontation started by a slightly larger group. But here's the detail that I just find so profoundly chilling. The police were very careful to say the violence wasn't instant. They specifically stressed that a conversation has taken place before the physical attack started.
That detail, that there was a conversation, is just so significant. It immediately shifts the whole dynamic away from, say, random violence or a sudden impulse to something that feels more calculated.
Or targeted.
Exactly, targeted. A conversation implies, maybe a prior relationship, a dispute, something that had to be discussed before it all went wrong. It suggests this wasn't just an accidental meeting.
It definitely fits with what the police said later, that they believe the incident was non-random, but we can get to that in a second. So the conversation happens, and then things escalate sharply.
That's when the facts just turned tragic. A knife was produced, the 17-year-old boy was stabbed, and crucially, the police were extremely specific about this.
What did they say?
He was stabbed once. And the location of the wound was his thigh. They described the injuries that resulted as fairly significant.
Wait, the injury was to the thigh, but it was fatal. I mean, that suggests a catastrophic amount of blood loss, maybe a major artery was hit?
It seems so. The initial sources don't speculate, but by emphasizing the location, the police are just reporting the known medical facts. It highlights a brutal reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That a single stab wound, even if it's not to the chest or torso, can be instantly fatal.
And despite how awful it was, we know that people nearby, they reacted straight away. The statements confirm witnesses rushed to help him.
Yes, they rushed to help and they called emergency services. New South Wales paramedics were there very quickly.
And it wasn't enough.
No. That effort, that immediate intervention from the public, it really speaks to the shock of the moment. But despite everyone's best efforts, the paramedics included, The severity of that single injury was it was too great. The 17-year-old died right there at the reserve.
Oh.
The speed with which that single wound proved fatal is one of the most devastating details they released.
And I guess the speed of the fatality is what kicked the police investigation into such high gear, which led to some very swift results. So let's move into the status of the investigation.
Okay, so one of the most critical facts they released very quickly was the arrest of a 15-year-old young person.
Right.
But this wasn't an arrest after a big manhunt or anything. The information we have says this individual actually came forward to the police.
And he wasn't alone, was he?
No, he was accompanied by his parents.
A parent bringing their child into the police, it speaks volumes about what must have been going on in those first few hours.
It absolutely fast-tracked at least one part of the investigation. But the work ahead for them is vast.
Yep.
A huge crime scene was established at the reserve, and because of the outcome, the state's homicide squad is now heavily involved.
Okay, so for our listeners, what does that actually signify? When the homicide squad gets involved in a case like this, what does it mean?
It just signals the absolute highest level of police attention and resources. Homicide squad involvement means this case immediately became a major, complex criminal investigation. They're looking at everything: forensics, background, motive, the connections between everyone involved.
It's elevated way beyond the local police force.
Oh, way beyond.
And this is where we come back to that really key assessment the police made early on, the one that links back to the conversation detail. Superintendent Moore confirmed that based on their initial work, they do not believe this was a random incident.
And that classification non-random is vital. It means the authorities are working on the assumption that the victim knew his attacker, or at least was specifically targeted by that group.
Which raises the big question, right? If it wasn't random, what was the relationship? What was the dispute that was being discussed in that conversation?
Exactly. But of course, the sources released this early. They give us absolutely no detail or speculation on the motive. The focus is just clearly on it being targeted violence.
And the investigation is still very much active.
Oh, absolutely. It's far from complete. Police explicitly stated they believe there are 1 to 2 other people who might be able to assist with their inquiries.
So even with the 15-year-old under arrest, there are still other people police need to speak to, probably the others who were there.
It confirms they're still building the full picture of that group of 2 to 3 who approached the victim and his friend. And they're making a very public plea for those individuals to come forward.
Okay, so beyond the forensics in the investigation, the sources also really captured the immediate, the emotional and official reaction. This is where you can feel the shock in the community.
Yeah, you really can. Superintendent Moore's summary of it all.
Yep.
It just captured the weight of the moment for everyone.
How does she describe it?
Her description was really raw and direct. She just called the death a tragedy and senseless. And she acknowledged that it had affected the whole community. When the head of the police command uses language like that, you really understand the gravity.
And this tragedy, it got attention beyond the local police pretty quickly. The sources include the reaction of the federal attorney general, Michelle Rowland.
Right. Her electorate of Greenway includes Rouse Hill, where this happened.
So why is that so telling?
Well, when a federal attorney general weighs in immediately on a local crime, it signals the event has resonated far beyond that suburb. It's a sign of national attention on things like youth violence and community safety.
And her statement was pretty emphatic. She said she was deeply saddened by the tragic death, and she offered condolences to the family straight away.
And she also used it as an opportunity to make a broader statement, didn't she, about social order?
She did. She explicitly said there is no place in our community for these acts of senseless violence.
Which really reinforces that official sentiment of just shock and condemnation.
It's clear the message that authorities are trying to send is one of profound concern. The sources sort of wrap up by highlighting the raw impact. The news was described as particularly distressing for local families.
And that phrase, it really speaks to the fact that this wasn't just another news story for people in that area. It felt like a violation of that safe space around their schools and their homes.
A collective vulnerability.
That's the perfect way to put it. That's what the community leaders were responding to. So where does all this leave you, the listener, trying to piece together these really intense, fragmented initial facts?
Well, it means we have a concise, clear record of where the investigation started. We know a 17-year-old was killed. It was a single, fatal stab wound to the thigh, near his home, near local schools,
It was a confrontation with 2 or 3 perpetrators?
and confirmed as a non-random targeted attack that came after a conversation. And critically, the primary suspect, a 15-year-old, is in custody after his parents brought him in.
These are the immediate foundations for what is now a major homicide squad investigation.
Yeah.
And I think the final thought to leave you with, based on this initial information, is that the investigation is really just beginning. Authorities are still actively looking for those 1 to 2 other people. The core question that is just hanging over this entire community, it's rooted in that one small detail we keep coming back to.
The conversation.
The conversation, what was said, and what was the underlying reason that led to that instantaneous, senseless escalation from just words to a fatal act of violence. That question that remains the profound, unanswered part of this story.
A deeply unsettling but absolutely essential question for this investigation to answer. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. We appreciate you taking the time.